This is a lecture entitled The Fighting in Mumbai. This is the first part of the lecture. The goal of this lecture is to create a clear, concise reason and to give an understanding for the fighting in Mumbai and other situations in India. Because you see, in India, as in any other country, to understand a country, you have to understand its history. You have to understand its legacy. You have to understand its fighters and liberators. You have to understand what the average citizen of India thinks and believes about beauty, children, honor, desire, and various other things. And most importantly, and last but not the least, you have to understand its caste system. When most people say the word India, or when the word India is, the country of India is brought up among foreigners who are foreign to the country, subjects such as the Taj Mahal, or beautiful actresses in Bollywood frolicking around with their tan skin and black hair, or even Kama Sutra, are some of the few subjects that arise. On a rare occasion, you may hear the legendary name of Mahatma Gandhi mentioned, and on an even more rare occasion, someone may begin to talk about the economic and social conditions of the average Indian and the caste system. But what is this caste system, and what separates it from other feudal systems of the past, such as feudal Japan or medieval Europe? Well, let us make a comparison. We'll start with feudal Japan. You see, in the feudal empire of Japan, you had on top was the emperor. Below him was the shogun. Below the shogun was the daimyo. Then the samurai. Then the ronin. A ronin is someone of samurai blood, samurai background, but they basically wander the earth fighting for whoever, or living off of their samurai ability. Then you had the merchants and craft makers. These were men who were able to make a living off of things that they were able to make, rare things that they were able to produce. Therefore, their skill was seen as valuable. And below, at the very bottom, you had the peasants. Men and women looked down upon because of the work that they did, or the work that they were required to do, and yet the very ones responsible for feeding for feeding the whole country. But it was in this system, it is the samurai, the middle class, educated in the arts and music and literate in reading, the middle class samurai that holds a great amount of power above the other classes. But even above the samurai and even above the daimyo, it was the shogun that had the most power. He was an owner of land, either given to him from the emperor to delegate over, or gained by war and conquest. And he was the owner of this land. The farmers would farm on this land that the shogun owned, and the samurai would protect the land. You see? So it was truly, in this system, it was the shoguns that had the most power. Even in Europe. In Europe, we have a different system. The kings and the royal family truly do hold the power. They are above all. But just below the kings, you have the nobles. They were most of them related to the king himself through blood. And they were high landowners. They owned much land. And they were the educated ones. They were the ones that could afford to teach their children how to read. They could afford to have their children have different skills and so on and so on. Even the fabled knights of the ages were people of noble descent. They were the men that could afford to buy a good shield, a good iron sword. They could afford to buy the armor, a horse to ride on, because they were of noble descent, which is what makes them fabled. And once again, below the knights, below the nobles, below the king, you have the poor farmers. But as they were called in Europe, they were called the serfs. And what the thing about the serfs is, they worked on land, the land of the nobles, and they would farm this land and produce its crops. And in exchange, the nobles would give them but a small plot of land to live on and support themselves. But what actually ended up happening is this would indebt the poor serfs, the poor farmers. They would actually end up working most of their life just to pay off for the small plot of land that the nobles have given to them. But now the question is, so what? The question is, what is it that separates this system from the caste system in India? What is it that separates them from each other? And the answer is this: India's system, caste system, one that still exists today, is based on color. It's based on color. And that's how educated and uneducated and fortunate and unfortunate are divided. But you see, to understand the caste system, you can't just jump straight into India and jump straight into the caste system. You have to understand how it happened. I'm sure the citizens of India didn't just wake up and say to each other, well, all of a sudden there's a caste system. So now you have to go back, even before the caste system itself existed, to gain an understanding, to gain a realization of it.